I'm Silent Flame, and today I'm going to say something uncomfortable, not because it's shocking, but because it's honest. I'm a Buddhist, and I've had sex, and I'm still walking the path toward awakening. Let me ask you, when you picture an enlightened one, what do you see? A celibate monk in a distant cave, a pure, desireless saint untouched by the body. If that's the image, if you believe that any sexual activity is a detour from liberation, then we need to talk, not around the issue, not with euphemisms, directly. Because here's the truth. Yes, a Buddhist can have sex and still reach enlightenment. But, and I mean this, only if they understand what sex really is and what it really isn't. Let's go deep. Let's begin where it's clear. The monastic path. In the Vinaya, the disciplinary code laid down by the Buddha, sexual intercourse by a monk results in automatic expulsion from the Sangha. A bhikkhu who engages in sexual intercourse is no longer a bhikkhu. Vinaya Pitaka Parajika 1. No warnings, no second chances, one act, and you're done. This is what's called a Parajika offense, one of the four gravest transgressions. Why so strict? Because for monastics, celibacy isn't just about morality, it's about structure, the very architecture of renunciation. Sex reinforces craving. Craving strengthens identity. Identity fuels the cycle of becoming, and that's samsara. The whole point of the monastic life is to break that wheel. But here's the thing most people miss. The Buddha never expected lay people to live like monks. He was deeply pragmatic. He recognized the difference between the forest and the village, between robes and regular life. For lay followers, the ethical code is simpler, the 5 precepts. Number 3, I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. That's it. Not refrain from sex, not refrain from desire. Just don't misuse sex. In early Buddhism, sexual misconduct meant adultery, exploiting others, sexually sleeping with minors or dependents, deceiving someone into sex. So, to put it plainly, ethical, consensual sex is not a violation of the lay Buddhist path. And more importantly, it's not an obstacle to enlightenment if your relationship to it is rooted in mindfulness and wisdom. There are countless suttas where the Buddha praises householders, men and women with spouses, children, wealth for their spiritual progress. He never said, give up sex or you'll never be free. That's a later myth, one that hurts more than it helps. Let me be clear, sex isn't evil. Pleasure isn't evil. Desire even isn't evil. Clinging is the problem. Identification is the problem. Ego is the problem. You can have sex without being enslaved by it. You can feel pleasure without chasing it endlessly. You can love without turning love into possession. Sex becomes unwholesome when it becomes an addiction. It becomes a tool for ego. It becomes your identity. As the Buddha said, not being attached to the seen, heard, sensed, or cognized. This is freedom. That includes sex, not suppression, not indulgence, freedom. Let's take a detour, not into celibacy, not into hedonism, but into a tradition that embraced desire itself as a tool for awakening, Tantric Buddhism, the wild child of the Buddhist family, the school that dares to say, sex is not the problem, your ignorance is. In the Vajrayana tradition, especially in Tibetan and Indo-Tibetan lineages, there exists a radical idea. Poison is transformed by the mind that knows. Instead of avoiding sex, you enter it with supreme awareness, using the heat of passion to burn through illusion. Tantric consort practices, sacred union rituals, visualizations of deities in embrace, they're all built on the notion that energy isn't the enemy, unconsciousness is. But here's the catch. True Tantra is not about pleasure, it's about death. death of ego, death of grasping, death of the duality between self and other. Most people, even modern neo-tantric teachers, don't understand this. They mistake sacred sexuality for sacred indulgence. In actual Vajrayana, the sexual practices were performed by advanced yogis, not beginners, conducted with vows, secrecy, and years of preparation, often entirely visualized, not physical, always aimed at transcending all identity, even gender, even body. This isn't an excuse to spiritualize your lust. It's a razor sharp path that only a few can walk, and fewer still survive. Tantra doesn't say sex is enlightenment. It says, if you have the courage, sex can be the fire that reveals enlightenment or consumes you. Let's talk about something that's often left out: women. Much of what we know about early Buddhism comes from texts written, copied, and preserved by men in patriarchal cultures. And unsurprisingly, female sexuality is often portrayed as dangerous, distracting, even demonic. Examples: the Therigatha includes verses of enlightened nuns, but their struggles are rarely discussed in mainstream teachings. In some Vinaya texts, women's bodies are described as inherently impure or seductive traps for monks. Even the Buddha hesitated to allow the ordination of women, only agreeing after multiple requests by Mahapajapati and Ananda. So here's a brutal truth. Much of what people think is Buddhist sexual morality is actually cultural sexism wrapped in robes. But real Dharma is not male, it's not female, it's not androgynous, it's beyond form. And if we are serious about awakening, we must confront this shadow, the suppression of female desire, the moral double standards, the silencing of women's voices, and burn it, because liberation must be for everyone, or it's for no one. Let's shift gears, not into religion, but into science. Neuroscience now confirms what meditators have known for centuries. Sexual energy is powerful, but it's not just physical. Orgasms create waves of neurotransmitters: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. Deep intimacy activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the same system trained in meditation. Long-term monogamous relationships often foster deeper emotional regulation, empathy, and presence. Sound familiar? Now, here's the paradox. For some people, sexual connection helps cultivate mindfulness, vulnerability, and compassion, the exact qualities the Buddha encouraged. But for others, sex becomes compulsive, addictive, or emotionally chaotic. So again, it's not about the act, it's about the mind behind the act. If your sexuality is driven by unconscious fear, craving, or ego, it will lead you further into suffering. But if it's grounded in awareness, honesty, and non attachment, it can become a mirror of the path, not the goal, not the enemy, just another tool in the toolbox of awakening. Let's set aside the commentaries, the monastic rules, even the cultural filters. Let's go back to the source, the Pali Canon. The words, the stories, the teachings most scholars agree are closest to what Gautama actually said. Here's what you'll find: not much about sex, seriously. For a tradition so often labeled anti-sex, the early suttas are surprisingly sparse when it comes to sexual morality. There are no long sermons about celibacy for lay people, no fiery condemnations of desire in marriage. What you do find is this: craving is the root of suffering. The mind that lusts after sensual pleasure is not free. The noble disciple refrains from sexual misconduct. That's it. No mention that sex in itself is defilement. No claim that a householder cannot be enlightened. No requirement to be celibate unless you've taken monastic vows. Let me give you one powerful example. Sita, the householder. In the Samyutta Nikaya, there's a layman named Sita who is praised again and again by the Buddha. He's described as a non-returner, someone who has realized deep stages of awakening and will never be reborn in lower realms. He was wealthy. He had a household. Do you think he never had sex, never loved, never touched another human being? The Buddha never rebuked him for it, never told him to renounce. Instead, he said, Sita, you are a lay follower who is wise and accomplished. And that's the point. Sex is not mentioned because it wasn't the issue. Craving was. And yet, somehow, we live in a world where people believe you can't meditate seriously and have a partner. Sexual pleasure is always a form of delusion. Real Buddhists are celibate. Where did this come from? Mostly from Victorian era translations. Colonial scholars who approached Buddhism through the lens of Christian asceticism, assuming that holy meant anti-body. They took words like karma, desire, and rendered them as sin. They took the ideal of simplicity and turned it into repression. Then add in the monastic institutions, especially in countries like Thailand or Sri Lanka, where monks hold enormous social authority and celibacy becomes a symbol of spiritual superiority. So what do they teach lay people? That sex is a lower path, that desire is defilement, that the body is to be overcome. But the Buddha never said that. He said, see things as they truly are, not as you wish them to be, not as you fear them to be. What are we afraid of? That desire will control us, but repressing it doesn't remove it. Only understanding does. Let's come back to the middle way, not just as a teaching, but as a lived practical strategy for freedom. The Buddha rejected both indulgence in sensual pleasure, self-mortification through extreme denial. Yet modern Buddhists often swing between these two extremes, suppressing sexuality and pretending it's not there, or justifying every desire as natural and spiritual. But the middle way is different. It says, don't suppress, don't indulge, investigate. It invites us to ask, why do I seek this pleasure? Am I using this person or connecting with them? Is my desire coming from wholeness or from emptiness? Am I awake while I act, or am I asleep in the act? This isn't a question of morality. It's a question of mindfulness. You can be celibate and still be full of craving. You can have sex and be completely free of clinging. Freedom isn't about what you do, it's about what owns you. So, where do I, silent flame, stand? I'll tell you, without hiding behind tradition, without quoting ancient texts out of context. You can have sex and still be free. You can be in love and still be unattached. You can walk the path while holding someone's hand, if you're not holding on out of fear. But here's the hard truth. Most people aren't having sex. They're chasing ghosts. They're not making love. They're making identities. They're not touching another soul. They're trying to patch the emptiness inside themselves. They're not surrendering. They're controlling. And that's where it all breaks down. It's not about what the Buddha said. It's about what you refuse to see. Are you using sex to awaken to the nature of desire, or to run from yourself? Because awakening doesn't require celibacy, but it does require truth. Truth in the body, truth in the heart, truth in the mirror. Most of us can't even look our partner in the eyes without shame or performance. How can we hope to see the nature of mind? So no, I'm not saying everyone should have sex, and I'm not saying it's irrelevant to spiritual life. I'm saying look at your relationship with desire, then look again, then again, until you're no longer afraid of it. Enlightenment isn't about removing sex. It's about removing ignorance. And that means waking up inside every act, even the ones you were taught to fear. I've seen celibate monks full of rage, I've seen lovers who move through the world like open sky. This path isn't about dogma, it's about presence. So, can you have sex and reach enlightenment only if you're willing to let go of everything you think sex is? Only if you're willing to meet it without grasping shame or illusion? Only if you can feel fully and not flinch? That's the edge. That's the truth. That's the fire. I'm silent flame. I don't care if you're celibate, partnered, queer, poly, or monogamous. I care if you're awake, because that's the only thing that ever mattered. Comment your truth below. Have you struggled with sexuality and the spiritual path? Have you found freedom inside desire, or only more chains? Subscribe for brutally honest Buddhist teachings every single week. No dogma, no fluff, just raw Dharma.